And I know in my work, and perhaps some of this may be helpful or useful to some of the junior faculty as well as to our administrators and clinicians who are here. One of the things that I've done is, similar to review the literature, but then also to put that review out there for administrators, for clinicians, in a format that hopefully they can utilize and look at, okay, if we're going to start somewhere, let's start with what we know works best in the most similar population we can find. And then the next step for me has always been then to take those findings and to add qualitative components to the work that I'm doing, to go out and say, this is what we think we know. Let me go and talk to the members of the population that I'm interested in serving, and I'm interested in my research being meaningful for. Let me go and talk and take this intervention manual out to the administrators and the social workers and the nurses and the midwives who are working in the clinics and say, does this make sense to you? Are these services that would fit with what you're doing? So overlap. And I think that, Jennifer may talk about this, but partnership as much as possible with those working in university settings. Folks who are in the agency setting bring just as much knowledge to me as I bring to them. They're the ones who can say, and I have a great example of this from my early work with a brilliant colleague, Nancy Grote. She wanted to go in and work with low-income families and do a couples intervention that had had some good success with other populations, and they flat out told her, this looks great, except this will never work here with our group. And so I think it's that sharing of knowledge. But yeah, look to the literature, let the researchers bring that to you, because it's impossible to do it in a practice setting with everything else that's going on for many folks.
I would just say ditto. But just, that tedious work of reviewing the literature, and outside of a university setting where you don't have access to databases and full text articles and 2 or 3 months of intensive time to sift through it all, it's quite overwhelming. So partnering with your friendly neighborhood researcher, and then I do the same thing. I bounce it back and forth, do focus groups with fathers, mothers, and service providers, and we come to sort of a consensus.
I have a comment and a question. The comment first. I've heard well-renowned colleagues who are caring and compassionate say that adaptation is so complex and so costly that we shouldn't try it until the intervention, the original or the first generation intervention, to quote Jennifer, you coined 2 terms today, has failed. And I just wanted to thank Dr. McKay for giving us a very clear picture of who the families that we serve are. And those families don't have the luxury of waiting for the intervention to fail before we start thinking about how we need to adapt it to make it more relevant to their context, to their culture, to their story. So thank you for that. The question is a little more challenging. In my own work looking at adaptation, and I'm sure many people here also have pulled up their hair thinking about this, often struggling with the question of what's an adaptation based on the fact that they're Hispanic, let alone Mexican American or Mexican or Puerto Rican or from Venezuela or from wherever it may be. What's an adaptation that's for a low-income family? What's an adaptation for a low formal education family? Those things are often so intertwined in the families that we work with that teasing it apart is a nightmare. So you had the opportunity of doing these multifamily groups with a variety of ethnic and racial families, and I'm wondering if your work can speak to that in some way.
So I'm going to try to answer your question, but I'm going to build off what you said to potentially make another point. Sometimes, as I think about trying to both practice and do research in very diverse settings, and I want to agree with the man that spoke before. When I got off the plane in Houston, I thought, wow, this is a diverse place. This is, I think that trying to serve diverse families, and I mean diversity in terms of race, I mean diversity in terms of ethnicity, I mean diversity in terms of experiences in this country. I also mean diversities of perspective on family life. That sometimes that's defined by your racial vantage point, your cultural vantage point. Sometimes it's just the collective experiences in your life. How can we create interventions that can handle that type of diversity? Because that's the challenge in the practice world. And so what I really try to kind of study is these kind of building of an intervention, an evidence-based intervention protocol. To what extent do I have to constrain and script, and to what extent can I allow for flexible application to my individual family? And that's been a huge challenge. It was sometimes us getting it right. So when you invite me to a conference, I present my study I'm most proud of right now. But there's a whole lot behind the scenes about places that we were wrong. We were off, either in terms of our engagement outcomes or in terms of our child outcomes. And so I think it's trying to create a protocol that allows maximum flexibility for how this particular evidence-based concept applies to my family and how you're going to use that. Also, I've been in enough settings to know that providers see us with our big binders and manuals coming, and they try to lock the doors, run away. And so a protocol that appreciates both a focus on the evidence base, but also when you go to NYU, it's an expensive MSW program, right? So the notion behind some of the rhetoric around evidence-based practice is forget what you learned in graduate school, do it exactly my way. And so for somebody that's invested tens of thousands of dollars trying to pick up an MSW, that message is not very well received. So where should your clinical skills be inserted? How do you use all those things we taught you in graduate school to really make this protocol come alive for families and be meaningful? And so I think that's how I think about kind of building those intervention protocols. Did I answer your question? The second thing I just wanted to pick up on what you said that I think is so important is that in at least my vantage point with the tremendous challenges that our clinics, and I have the privilege of directing a statewide Child Mental Health Technical Assistance Center from our university as well, the challenges that agencies have had to pick up these evidence-based practices, even with a lot of funding and a lot of training, some of them can be picked up if you kind of can couple them with intensive engagement strategies. And those of you that heard me talk in other contexts know that I believe pretty strongly in systematic engagement interventions coupled with even existing EBPs as they are. And so the attention that we try to pay to the front end, even if we're not going to adapt a practice at all, is what's the likely uptake of this practice from providers and families, and is there anything we can do to enhance that? And so that's a strategy to be able to provide evidence-based practices as they exist, but to really pay attention to what plagues them most in the real world, which is providers don't do them and families don't come. And so we've taken that tact as well.
One last question? Well, thank you so much. And let me present to you. Yeah. I love you.